On August 15th, 1248, Cologne's leaders gathered to ignite Europe's most audacious dream, a cathedral built to scrape the sky and to house the bones of ancient kings. Millions of stones, centuries of halted work, and waves of war threatened to turn this holy vision into a monument of failure. Why did so many risk everything to build higher than anyone dared? And what secrets still haunt the walls of Germany's greatest cathedral? The darkness at its core begins here. On the morning of August 15th, 1248, the city of Cologne stood at a crossroads between the old world and a vision for the future. Crowds pressed close to the cathedral site where Archbishop Konrad von Hochstaden prepared to lay the foundation stone for a church unlike any the city had seen. The day was chosen with purpose, the Feast of the Assumption, a time when the faithful believed heaven itself drew near. Konrad's gesture was more than ritual. He was staking the city's claim as a spiritual capital, determined to outshine the great cathedrals of France. The relics of the three Magi, brought to Cologne decades earlier, had already turned the city into a magnet for pilgrims and merchants. Now Konrad envisioned a sanctuary grand enough to house the legendary bones, a monument that would draw the eyes and devotion of all Europe. The foundation charter, drafted in careful Latin, named the project as both a house for God and a fortress for the relics. Konrad's signature pressed into the wax set in motion, a campaign that would consume fortunes and generations. He called on the city's guilds, wealthy merchants, and the faithful to contribute, promising spiritual rewards and civic glory in return. For Cologne's leaders and craftsmen, the project was a leap of faith, an undertaking that would demand patience, ingenuity, and sacrifice. The foundation at stake was as much civic as it was sacred. The first stones were laid into ground that had already seen centuries of worship. Remnants of older churches, some dating back to the earliest Christian communities in the region, were cleared to make way for the new foundation. Konrad's vision required not just faith, but a master plan that could support walls and towers reaching heights few dared attempt. As the foundation stone settled into place, prayers rose for the success of the building and the souls of those who would labor over it. The act bound the city's future to the ambition of its leaders and the sanctity of its relics. In that moment, Cologne's destiny was set, not just as a place of worship, but as a stage for the struggles, hopes, and burdens that would follow for centuries. Meister Gerhard, known in the records as Gerhard von Ryle, stepped onto the cathedral site with a vision shaped by the soaring lines of Paris and Amiens. His appointment as master mason in the late 1240s brought not only technical skill but a new ambition for Cologne, one that demanded both artistry and relentless organization. Under his direction, the workshop became a hive of activity. Stonecutters, carpenters, and laborers, some local, others drawn from as far as France, worked side by side, each marked by the rhythm of hammers and the discipline of the craft. Payroll rolls from the period show dozens of names, but Gerhard stands alone at the top, responsible for both the design and the day-to-day management of the build. The first priority was the choir at the eastern end. This was not just a matter of tradition, it was a calculated choice. By focusing on the choir, Gerhard aimed to create a liturgical heart for the cathedral, a space that could be consecrated and used for worship even as the rest of the structure rose around it. The workforce swelled each summer, with up to 1,000 men on site during peak years. Mason's marks carved into the choir's pillars and vaults still bear silent witness to individual hands and workshops, each symbol a record for payment and pride. Stone for the choir came from the Drachenfels quarries along the Rhine, floated north on barges and unloaded at the city's edge. Blacksmiths shaped iron tools. Carpenters raised scaffolding that climbed higher with each season. The logistics were daunting. Every block had to be measured, cut, and hoisted by treadwheel cranes operated by men walking inside giant wooden wheels. Records from the Dombau Hut show that even the smallest error in lifting or alignment could set back weeks of work. By 1322, after decades of labor, the Eastern Choir was ready. That year, the chapter held the first great consecration ceremony within the new Gothic space. The choir's soaring vaults and luminous windows created a setting worthy of the relics of the three kings. For the first time, the people of Cologne gathered beneath stonework that rivaled the greatest churches of France. Choral music echoed off the fresh masonry, and liturgical life resumed in a space that was both new and ancient at once. Gerhard's leadership set the standard for generations of builders who followed. Though he would not live to see the cathedral finished, his design and methods shaped every stone that rose after him. The choir's completion was a triumph of human craft and discipline, but it also revealed the scale of the challenge ahead. With the eastern end secure, attention turned to the technical obstacles that would define the next centuries: how to build higher, span wider, and keep the dream alive when resources and certainty began to waver. Beneath the cathedral's soaring walls lies a world hidden from sight, shaped by the restless waters of the Rhine and the ambitions of a city determined to build higher than any before. The ground at Cologne's edge was no easy canvas. Layers of damp soil, sand, and ancient debris pressed against the riverbank, threatening to swallow any monument not anchored with care. Medieval builders faced a simple but daunting question: how do you set a foundation for a structure that will weigh hundreds of thousands of tons and rise more than 150 meters into the sky? The answer began with stone, lots of it. Massive blocks of trachyte, quarried from the Drachenfels hills some 40 kilometers upstream, became the backbone of the cathedral's substructure. Each block was cut by hand, marked by the chisel signatures of stonecutters who knew their work would never see daylight. Barge manifests from the 13th century record a steady flow of stone shipments down the Rhine. In peak building months, teams of haulers and dock workers unloaded up to 50 tons a day at makeshift wharves, the river's current both a friend and a hazard. High water could strand shipments for weeks, while low water exposed the muddy banks, making unloading a battle against time and tide. On site, the foundation trenches plunged deeper than most city buildings of the era. Builders layered stone, lime, and rubble, creating a platform broad enough to spread the cathedral's enormous weight. Archaeological core samples taken centuries later reveal foundations up to 5 meters thick in some places, each layer compacted by the relentless labor of men working in cramped, wet pits. The work was muddy, cold, and dangerous. Wages for foundation laborers appear in cathedral accounts alongside extra rations of bread and ale, small compensation for days spent waist-deep in water and clay. The supply chain stretched far beyond the city walls. Blacksmiths forged iron clamps and tools, carpenters prepared timber for scaffolding, and quarrymen at Drachenfels kept pace with the endless demand for uniform blocks. Every stone had to be measured, shaped, and numbered before being loaded for its journey. Mistakes in quarrying or loading meant delays, wasted effort, and sometimes the loss of entire shipments to the river's unpredictable currents. The foundation work set the pace for everything that would follow. The sheer volume of materials moved, by hand, by barge, by oxen, tied the fate of the cathedral to the rhythms of the Rhine and the discipline of its workers. As the last stones settled into place below ground, the builders looked upward, knowing that every layer of masonry above would depend on the unseen strength laid in the mud and rock beneath their feet. Cologne Cathedral's rise depended on a structural logic as daring as its ambition. The ribbed vault, a signature of high Gothic architecture, transformed the ceiling into a network of slender stone ribs. Each rib traced a precise path, collecting the weight of the vault and channeling it to specific points, much like the strands of a spider's web. This allowed the spaces between to be filled with thinner stone panels, reducing the load without sacrificing strength. The ribs did not simply decorate, they defined the entire system, dictating where forces would travel and where the building could reach higher. The real breakthrough came in how these forces exited the building. Instead of relying on massive, solid walls to absorb the vault's thrust, medieval builders devised flying buttresses. These stone arms sprang from the upper walls, arched over the side aisles, and landed on sturdy exterior piers. Each buttress was tailored to counter the outward push from the vaults above. If the angle was wrong or the length misjudged, the wall could bow or the buttress itself could fail. The system demanded constant adjustment and a deep understanding of geometry, as every new vault changed the balance of forces. Masons at the Dombauhut worked from full-scale templates, laying out the complex geometry of each rib on tracing floors. Stones had to be carved with precision, since even a minor error at a rib intersection could threaten the entire vault. Marks left by these craftsmen still appear on the ribs today, silent evidence of their skill and accountability. The flying buttresses, too, were feats of calculation. Their placement and dimensions were determined by experience and trial, pushing the limits of what stone could bear. This structural system let Cologne Cathedral soar. The choir vaults reached over 40 meters, rivaling the tallest in France. But with every meter gained, the risks multiplied. The higher the vault, the greater the outward force, and the more critical the alignment of ribs and buttresses. Failures at other cathedrals, like the collapse at Beauvais, haunted the builders. Their answer was caution and redundancy, testing each vault before daring to climb higher. The interplay of ribs and buttresses was more than engineering. It was a declaration of faith in mathematics and human ingenuity. Each stone set in place was a negotiation with gravity and with the limits of medieval tools. As the cathedral rose, the challenge of lifting and aligning ever larger stones would soon define the next stage. Above, the damp trenches and heavy foundations, the cathedral's real drama played out in the open air, where wood, rope, and human muscle became the engines of progress. Timber scaffolds rose in tangled lattices, some stretching higher than any building in Cologne. These platforms were the lifelines for masons and laborers who spent their days balanced above empty space, chiseling stone and setting blocks in place. At the heart of the operation stood the treadwheel cranes, giant wooden machines powered by men walking inside wheels as wide as a city gate. Each crane could lift several tons, but only at the pace a man could walk, and always with the threat of a snapped rope or a shifting load. The largest, mounted on the trunk of the South Tower, became a fixture on Cologne's skyline for centuries. Its silhouette marked both ambition and the limits of medieval technology, a symbol of work left unfinished and of the heights already reached. Payroll ledgers and workshop accounts from the Dombauhütte reveal a world of numbers and names, most now forgotten. At the busiest times, up to 1,000 workers crowded the site. Masters, journeymen, apprentices, and laborers, all tracked by daily wages and piecework tallies. Some were local, others drawn from distant towns by the promise of steady pay. Their lives were governed by the rhythm of the build, long summer days for stone setting and winter months for carving and tool repair. Accidents and injuries were common. A misstep on slick planks or a crane failure could mean a broken limb or worse. The records show extra payments for dangerous work and rations of bread and ale for men on the highest scaffolds. Every stone carried a story. Masons' marks, unique symbols carved into each block, served as proof of labor and a claim for payment. These marks still dot the choir and rising walls, silent signatures of hands that shaped the cathedral. Some stones bear the same mark over decades, tracing the career of a single mason. Others show the churn of workshops as families and guilds joined, left, or were replaced by newcomers. The marks also helped manage disputes, ensuring no one was shorted for work done at dizzying heights. Despite the scale, the workforce was a community, bound by rules and rituals as much as by wages. Masters taught apprentices not just how to carve stone, but how to trust the cranes, the ropes, and each other. Carpenters and blacksmiths kept the wheels turning and the tools sharp. The daily grind was relentless, but the pride in each new course of stone ran deep. The cathedral's rise was measured in calloused hands, in the slow turn of the treadwheel, and in the thousands of marks left behind, each one a testament to the labor, risk, and stubborn hope that built Cologne's great monument. By the 1470s, the energy that once drove Cologne's cathedral skyward had begun to sputter. For generations, the city's leaders, guilds, and clergy had poured resources into stone and glass, but now the flow of money slowed to a trickle. Council minutes from the late 15th century reveal a city wrestling with competing demands, defending the city walls, repairing bridges, and funding civic projects, all pressed against the cathedral's claims on the treasury. The Dombauhütte, once bustling with hundreds of masons and laborers, faced empty ledgers and unpaid wages. Records from around 1473 show a sharp decline in municipal subsidies and private donations. The merchant guilds, who had once seen the cathedral as a symbol of civic pride, began to question the burden of special taxes levied for its construction. Petitions to the council argued that the city's prosperity depended more on trade and defense than on unfinished towers. Some masters and journeymen drifted to other projects, while others stayed on, hoping for a revival that never came. The change was not only economic. Tastes across Europe were shifting away from the soaring lines of Gothic architecture. Wealthy patrons, who once competed to endow chapels or windows, now favored the new Renaissance style, with its emphasis on proportion and classical detail. The cathedral's unfinished nave and tower stump became less a promise of future glory and more a monument to past ambition. Within the city council, debates grew sharper. Minutes from the period record arguments over whether cathedral levies should be continued or redirected. Some guilds, weary of repeated assessments, demanded relief. Others insisted that abandoning the project would shame Cologne in the eyes of rivals. But the arithmetic was unforgiving. The costs of raising the South Tower, already immense, outstripped the city's willingness to pay. By the mid-1470s, the last major contracts for stone and scaffolding disappeared from the accounts. The great treadwheel crane, once the engine of progress, stood idle atop the unfinished tower, visible to all as a sign that the work had stopped. The cathedral was not abandoned, but its future was left uncertain. The choir remained in use for worship, sealed off from the incomplete nave by temporary walls. Meanwhile, the city's attention turned elsewhere. The financial freeze of the 1470s was not a single decision, but a slow unraveling, a collective withdrawal of support that left Cologne's grandest project suspended between earth and sky. For the next 3 centuries, the unfinished cathedral would stand as both a memory of ambition and a reminder of limits, waiting for a new generation to decide whether the dream was worth reviving. For centuries, the unfinished cathedral dominated Cologne's skyline, not as a monument to triumph, but as a daily reminder of halted dreams. The great treadwheel crane, perched atop the South Tower, became a fixture above the city, its wooden form weathered by rain and sun, frozen in place while generations passed below. Locals grew up with its silhouette, so constant that it slipped from scandal to symbol, woven into the city's identity. Travelers arriving by river or road described the site in their diaries. A Gothic giant, half awake, with a crane like a stranded ship's mast rising above the stonework. As decades turned to centuries, the cathedral's meaning drifted from sacred ambition to secular curiosity. The nave, unfinished and exposed, played host to markets, gatherings, even military drills. During the French occupation in the late 18th century, the cathedral's sanctity gave way to necessity. Hay and supplies for soldiers filled the empty spaces, and the building's echoing shell became a storehouse rather than a sanctuary. Yet the very incompleteness that once embarrassed city leaders began to attract new eyes. By the early 1800s, artists and poets swept up in the Romantic movement found inspiration in the cathedral's ruined grandeur. Painters like Karl Hasenpflug and Caspar Scheuren captured the crane in their canvases. framing the cathedral as a relic of a lost era, a sublime ruin caught between decay and hope. Their works traveled across Europe, turning Cologne's unfinished towers into icons of longing and imagination. Writers described the cathedral as a sleeping giant, its crane a symbol of human limits and ambition deferred. The city's youth, raised beneath its shadow, spun legends about the crane. Some claimed it would fall only when the world ended, others that it guarded the city against disaster. Local songs and stories wove the image into folklore, until the crane itself became as much a part of Cologne's story as the stones below it. As romantic fascination grew, so did public longing for completion. The unfinished cathedral, once a source of civic frustration, was recast as a canvas for dreams and national pride. Painters and poets made it a symbol of endurance and possibility, stoking a new appetite to finish what ancestors had begun. The crane, once a marker of failure, became a beacon for revival, a silent witness waiting for the city's will to rise again. In the early 19th century, the unfinished cathedral stood as both a relic and a challenge. Generations had passed under the gaze of its stranded crane and its incomplete towers, but the dream of completion had not faded, it had simply changed hands. The spark for revival came from a new kind of movement. Citizens, artists, and scholars inspired by Romanticism and a growing sense of national identity. In 1842, a coalition of civic leaders, clergy, and concerned citizens formalized their commitment by founding the Kölner Dombauverein, the Cathedral Building Association. Their charter was both practical and visionary, to gather the resources needed to finish what centuries of ambition had left undone. The Dombauverein launched a campaign that reached far beyond Cologne. Newspapers carried appeals for donations, pamphlets described the cathedral's history and plight, and subscription lists traveled from town to town. The message was clear. This was not just a local project, but a cause for all Germans. Membership in the association became a badge of civic pride. Families sent coins, merchants pledged profits, and schoolchildren contributed their savings. Annual reports from the Dombauverein record a growing tide of support. In the first decade, thousands of donors, from wealthy patrons to ordinary workers, added their names and funds to the effort. This was a movement of the people, a cultural revival that crossed class lines. The momentum caught the attention of the Prussian monarchy. King Friedrich Wilhelm IV, eager to unite his Catholic and Protestant subjects and to claim the cathedral as a symbol of German unity, pledged royal patronage. On September 4, 1842, the king arrived in Cologne for a public ceremony that echoed the original foundation stone, laying nearly 6 centuries earlier. Dignitaries, clergy, and crowds filled the square as the king placed a new stone at the base of the unfinished towers, signaling the official restart of construction. His presence transformed the effort from a regional revival into an affair of state, and royal funds began to flow alongside popular donations. The Dombauverein's tactics reflected both the traditions of medieval fundraising and the tools of a modern age. Lotteries, benefit concerts, and public exhibitions showcased models and relics, drawing visitors and generating income. Detailed financial statements published by the association tracked every contribution, creating transparency and trust. The association's records preserved in the Dombau Archive show how money was allocated to materials, wages, and technical planning. The influx of resources allowed for the hiring of new architects and engineers, the reopening of quarries, and the mobilization of a workforce ready to take on the challenge of finishing the cathedral according to its medieval plan. With the financial engine finally running, the Dombauverein and its royal partner set the stage for a technical and artistic push unlike anything seen in centuries. The cathedral, once a symbol of halted ambition, was poised to become a monument to perseverance and collective will. On October 15, 1880, the city of Cologne erupted in celebration. After more than 6 centuries, the cathedral's twin spires finally pierced the sky, reaching 157 meters, higher than any building in the world at that moment. Bells rang out across the Rhine, and crowds filled the square, jostling for a glimpse of the final stones set in place. The ceremony drew dignitaries from across Germany and beyond. Flags snapped in the wind, and the air crackled with speeches, prayers, and the sense of a long-delayed promise finally kept. International newspapers rushed to cover the event. For many, the completion of the cathedral was not just an architectural feat, but a statement of national renewal. The towers, built according to the rediscovered medieval plans, became instant symbols of unity for the newly formed German Empire. Their silhouette was stamped onto coins, postcards, and patriotic prints. The press described the spires as a triumph of faith and perseverance, but also as monuments to a resurgent German spirit, an image carefully cultivated by both church and state. The technical achievement behind the spires was immense. Engineers and masons, led by Ernst Friedrich Zwirner and later Richard Voitel, worked with a blend of medieval drawings and modern tools. Each block of stone was hoisted by steam-powered cranes, a far cry from the treadwheels that had once creaked over the city. The builders followed the original Gothic design with extraordinary fidelity, ensuring that the new work did not overshadow the old. Yet hidden within the stone were steel reinforcements and iron cramps, silent evidence of 19th century anxieties about stability at such heights. For Zwirner, completion was both a personal and professional legacy. His correspondence reveals the pressure he faced to honor the medieval vision while satisfying the nationalist ambitions of his patrons. The final form of the towers was not just a matter of aesthetics or engineering, but a negotiation between history and the present. The spires soared above the city, visible for miles along the Rhine, intended as both a beacon of faith and a marker of German unity. As fireworks lit the night sky and choirs filled the nave with music, the project was officially declared complete. Yet beneath the surface celebration, the cathedral now bore layers of meaning, sacred and secular, medieval and modern, local and national. The stones of the spires reflected not just the light of the setting sun, but the ambitions, anxieties, and hopes of every generation that had labored beneath them. In the spring of 1942, air raid sirens swept over Cologne as Allied bombers filled the sky. The cathedral, already centuries old, stood exposed at the heart of a city marked for destruction. Over the next 3 years, 14 bombs struck the building directly. High explosive charges tore through the roof, igniting fires that threatened to spread across the nave and choir. Shattered stone rained down from the towers. Medieval pinnacles and modern repairs alike crashed to the ground. Yet the main structure held, its massive walls and buttresses absorbing shock that flattened blocks all around. Inside, firefighters raced up narrow spiral stairs, dragging hoses and buckets into the smoke. Cathedral clergy and volunteers joined them, forming lines to douse flames before they could leap from the wooden roof into the vaults below. Water pressure often failed, forcing men to use sand or even their coats to smother embers. Damage logs from these nights record scorched beams, cracked vaults, and broken glass, but they also note where quick action saved whole sections from collapse. By 1945, the city lay in ruins, but the cathedral remained standing, battered but upright. Emergency repairs began almost immediately. Temporary roofs were thrown over open vaults, and scaffolding rose to stabilize fractured stone. Through the late 1940s and into the 1950s, crews worked to replace destroyed windows, mend the towers, and reinforce cracked ribs. The effort restored not just a building, but a symbol of survival. Each repaired stone carried the memory of those who fought to keep the cathedral from joining the rubble. Rain, soot, and the vibrations of city life gnaw at Cologne Cathedral every day. The battle for preservation is unending. In the shadow of the spires, the Dombauhütte, Cologne's traditional cathedral workshop, remains at work just as it has for centuries. Craftsmen and engineers now wield both chisels and computers. Laser scanning maps every crack in the facade. Sensors monitor micro-movements in the towers. Conservationists study the slow decay of trachyte and sandstone, tracing the scars left by acid rain and modern pollution. Each year, dozens of stones are replaced, cut to match the medieval originals, then marked by the hands that shaped them. The workshop's ledger, once filled with medieval names, now records new generations of masons and glaziers. In 1996, UNESCO recognized the cathedral as a World Heritage Site, citing not only its Gothic design, but the living tradition that keeps it standing. The cost of survival is constant vigilance. The cathedral's future depends on the same blend of skill, patience, and care that first raised its walls. The work will never truly be finished. In a world where conflict still threatens cultural heritage, Cologne's cathedral stands as both a warning and a promise. Its survival, despite 14 direct bomb hits and centuries of turmoil, proves that what we build can outlast what we destroy. Today, its spires cast long shadows over a divided past and an uncertain future. The question now is whether we protect these living symbols or let silence replace their stories. What do you think? Share your thoughts below.